Okay. I've passed out an outline of what we're going to try to do this morning, and I'm not a very good proofreader, I have to admit that. So if you're real particular about things, the title is Starting Your Family Tree, not Starting Your Adventure.
It is an adventure.
Yeah,
it is an adventure.
And that was the title I was going to use, and it's the 20th of January, not the 13th. That was last Saturday when we had to cancel. And so for our introduction, what I'd like to do is start with Sue and just kind of go around and tell us three things. Hi, basketball?
There we go, never met, I'm from the church.
Oh, okay. Why don't we start with Sue and go around, just tell us three things, and they're on there to help with your memory. Who are you? I think most of us are familiar with each other, but just say. And then how far are you in doing your family tree? It gives me an idea of, just kind of what level you're at. My assumption is that we're starting with people that just really haven't done this at all, and to help you start. But if you're all much higher up, then we could kind of zip through this. And but there's some important information here that you really have to keep in mind. Even if you're an advanced genealogist, they make the same mistakes. And I don't want you to start out that way. And then the third thing is, what are your goals, especially that. Tell me what you're looking for in not only in this Saturday's class, but in the second and third time that we're going to do that, because I can adjust it to be more fitting to what you're looking for. So Sue?
Okay, I'm Susan Gust. I started this about 4 years ago when my daughter gave me a year's subscription to Ancestry.com. So that really got me going, and I was obsessed with it for a while. I was very sure of 2 generations back from my parents, and I did my husband's side of the family too, but that was a little sketchier. Because his grandmother's maiden name was Custer, and everyone in the family kept saying, "Oh, they were related to, the Custer." And in searching on his mother's side of the family, I kept getting all the Custers who were in Pennsylvania, and I couldn't get any. Back a couple generations, anyone to the Custers in Virginia, which I think is where General Custer's family came from. But at any rate, so that kind of was, I didn't get anywhere with that. But with my family, I knew at least 2 generations back. And after that, I was able to figure out that all my family came over from Germany between the 1840s and the 1860s. Through New York, through Ellis Island. And that was pretty easy to trace. And I even have pictures of some of these people. Oh my God, are they ugly? They're just horrible, horrible pictures of all these old people. And then after that, I knew that my mother's side of the family was from northern Germany near the Baltic Sea, and my dad's side of the family was southern Germany near Italy. But of course, Germany and Italy and all those countries did not exist in those days. And so then I kind of went back from the children's names, which I knew, to their parents, and what part of Germany, and ages that made sense. And I was able to see some cemetery markers and some birth certificates and things like that. But I pretty much, as we all know, trying to read the German script and the horrible reproduction of a lot of these things was not very good. My niece in Minneapolis also was working on it. We got together and we pretty much agreed on what we had, And then she sent me an email about a month ago that she had bought a family membership to Ancestry. So then I figured out how to join that, and believe me, I didn't remember what my Ancestry sign-on was, password, so I had to start all over and redo everything. But she had done another generation back, which was into the early 1700s. How accurate all this is, I don't know, because it's so hard. Ancestry gives you a lot of information and they will always send you hints, but it's difficult to read a lot of the marriage things, birth things, death things, because of the horrible handwriting in the German script. So how accurate these things are, they make sense to me as far as names of the children and then their parents. So that's where I am.
Okay, and what are your goals for this class?
Well, actually, what's interesting is my oldest daughter said, Mom, if we can trace back, I think it's only 2 generations on either side of the family, that someone was actually born in Germany. Within 2 generations, you could get I don't know if it's a European or a German citizenship.
Okay,
Which was, she's looking into it, and actually I did find on Ken's side of the family that his grandfather was actually born in Germany in the late 1800s. So that's 3 generations back, and so she said, well, she didn't know if that was good enough, but she took the information, and she's looking into getting some kind of a German or European citizenship. What that would get her, I have no idea, but that's, yeah, as far as me, I'm just interested,
okay.
you know.
Beth,
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to look
you
up
got your
how far back I
library there
go.
with you.
I started this, it has to be 10 years ago when my mom and dad gave me this, which my mother's uncle, my grandmother's brother hired somebody to research the whole family tree. So that's what all this is. And I've spent a lot of time putting it into Ancestry and building a family tree there. It's sort of neat. It goes back to, I forget what his name is, that's what I was looking at for a date. Jonathan Plummer, I think it is, who came to this country in what year was the Mayflower?
1620.
20. I think it was
16.
either 1624 or 26, so it was
Wow.
a few years after the Mayflower.
So
So
this-
family on my grandmother's side goes back that far.
Okay, Plummer, English.
Plummer, yeah,
They landed
and one
in-
M, but they always pronounced it Plummer, not Plumer.
And they landed in the New England area?
Somewhere, I have tried and I haven't been able to find, I would love to find the name of the ship that they came on
Okay,
and where from. I talked to you about that a little bit, and you gave me some places and they were still downloading manifests, and last time I was there with ship names, because there were a lot of ships that came. I didn't realize there were that many.
In the 1600s?
Hmm?
Early 1600s?
Early 1600s,
Oh,
yeah, there's stories here of family, the Revolutionary War having the Patriots meeting in their house and everything, and
Oh my gosh.
apparently there's a lot of DAR in the family, so I could probably do that. There was one ancestor somewhere, I don't remember, who I was reading off to my husband. The narrative said, yeah, he was in Civil War. He was at these battles, and I'm reading him off, and Don goes, he was with Sherman on the march through Georgia. He caught the order, I didn't, but so that was sort of neat.
okay.
I'd like to learn more about my mother's side of the family. That's very thin. I know my great-grandmother, who I remember, her father was born in Germany, so it doesn't go back that far. So I have pretty much set that far back. But apparently her grandparents were married in one of the churches in Wittenberg, and I would love to find out which one. I don't know.
Mm.
And then the third thing I've been working on is Don's family, who, his grandfather was born in Germany. So I have found out what the name of the ship is and his great-grandfather and all the brothers and sisters who came over. And I've been able to trace the one that he is descended from, which I forget which one that is, but
Are you
all of the
doing
other
all-
brothers and sisters, we have no idea what happened to them, because there were like 6 or 8 of them.
Are you doing all that from Ancestry?
No.
Oh, you
This
still
I-
from,
Well, some of this stuff for his family, we were in Fort Wayne for a while. He was at one of the district conventions. So I went to the library there. I didn't find a lot, but I did find some narratives, and I wrote them all down from Lombard, because they were one of the initial settlers in Lombard. In fact, there's a whole tract that's called the Stock Farm or something, you know. So I found some of that. That's where I know some of his family, but he'd sort of like to know more of what happened to the other descendants that came over. So that's,
Did they all come at the same time?
yeah, he did.
Was it like
I'm just trying.
these brothers and sisters?
His
that
brothers
came
and sisters. I have his grandparents were born in like the 1840s. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them came over with him. The youngest being born in 1883, who I think is his uncle or his
Okay, so
grandfather.
they came as a
William.
family
He-
unit.
They came as a family
around the
unit from Germany.
1840s.
Apparently he
And-
had been a Prussian colonel or something,
Okay,
and after the war, moved with his whole family.
okay.
Oh, and he says there's a family legacy, or story that some of the family was actually over here during the Revolutionary War as Hessians. I have no idea if I can ever find out if that's true or not,
Yeah,
but,
that's a challenge.
yeah.
wow.
Okay, hello,
Hi, is this the genealogy class?
yes,
I am so sorry I'm late.
well, that's all right.
I'm gonna join it.
Well, what I found interesting in doing my husband's side of the family is his mom's family. They were all from Germany, the Germany area also. But they came over as a congregation from a church
Yeah,
and came in through New Orleans.
okay.
And I have proof of that, but I thought it was interesting that that congregations would come over in mass.
Mhm.
Have you heard of that? or
Oh,
seen
yeah.
that?
Very prevalent.
Yeah.
Very prevalent. The idea of a single person with no relations coming to America,
Was, yeah.
extremely rare, extremely.
Well, and all my ancestors on both my sides of the family all came over through Ellis Island and settled in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And that was the big
Okay,
place for,
let's, if we can, let's move on.
I think I've been doing this for about 30 years.
oh my gosh.
Didn't know much about my dad's family, and we went down to visit his last remaining uncle. And I started asking questions and got information that way, and started. I just got real interested in that. So I've been researching my mom and my dad's family for about 30 years. I've been doing Jan's family for about 20 years.
Can you speak a little louder?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
And found a lot of interesting stuff. I think my goal is to find out what other people are doing and sharing what I've done. I figure after 30 years I've probably learned something.
Yeah, for sure, teaching this.
Have you used Ancestry at all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've used a lot of different information, and one of the neatest things I found was not on Ancestry, but one of my mom's, my great-grandfather was, his last name was Wells, and the Wells were from Connecticut, Vermont area. One of my great ancestors helped found the city of Halifax, Vermont, and he was a town clerk. And I have found a lot of his writings for the town. And he had good handwriting. It was great. I can read everything he wrote. But it's kind of interesting to look back and find somebody's handwriting who's a relative and it's 250 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
to be able to read it. And I just found that fascinating.
Hey, Brian,
Okay, Brian Hott. I'm really interested in learning how to do this because I would like to really be able to explain to our family, or explain our family heritage to our relative, my relatives. And I think as far as, I'm just starting, haven't done, although my father must have been fairly interested in it because he purchased several books on genealogy. One I brought here this morning for Pastor to look at, or Eric to look at. The other two I'll bring, the other three, one's in Florida, so I gotta go get that. But but they're actually, the one I think is the family history of the George Hott family. About this thick. Got another book that's about that thick. And then another sidebar to this is trying to learn a little bit more about the meaning and origins of heraldry. Specifically, does your family have a coat of arms? And I'd like to find out. I got a book that says we do, but I don't know too much about it.
okay. Ann, your name?
Yeah, and I'm sorry I'm late. I was waiting for my husband and he didn't realize the time I had to leave. I'm Holly Hill, and my dad died in 2021, and I kind of want to pick up where he left off because he was just starting to do this, like look into the family. He was finding some really interesting things, and I thought, I'm really interested in that too. So I thought and thought, this might be a good place to start to get reinterested in sort of the where he left off. And then on another note, I also wanted to offer my resources. I am new, I work at the cemetery here, Concordia Cemetery, and if anyone has relatives buried there, I'd be happy to help, look through our records there. It goes back to 1903, the Concordia Cemetery in Hammond. And, if anyone wants to avail themselves of those resources, I'd be happy to guide them with that too, so.
Okay. What's the family name of your father?
Their last name is Schwan.
Schwan? German, English?
German, mostly all German.
Okay.
They were very big in the early days of the LCMS. So some of the relatives were, involved with that. And then that was like our branch, like Heinrich Schwan and all that. But then he was finding this whole other branch that was very interesting, of a cousin of his that did all sorts of interesting things, like brought baseball to Cuba and was a war hero and things like that. So I kind of wanted to revisit some of those things.
Okay. Well, thank you. It sounds like, Brian's kind of at the starting level, and most of you are what I would call mid to maybe upper mid level. And you're just starting, okay. We're gonna try to, and this first session is really the basics, like, I don't know anything about it, how do I start? And as I told the ones that are more experienced, we'll kind of go through it. I do want to hit the high points, so you feel that you're getting the information you need to start. And for the others, there's some things that even beginners need to have it repeated over and over again, because even the expert genealogists make these mistakes, and they can be very costly mistakes. There's a gentleman in England who spent something like 50 years doing his family genealogy. He had it really very well developed, and then he found out he had been adopted. His parents never told him that. He just happened to run across this, and so it was like, this isn't my family. But, you know, with good graces, he kept on because he was focused on that family. But we want to try to avoid those kind of pitfalls. Okay, if you have your outline, the basics. Okay, you always start with yourself. Don't start with, as we talked about, some Admiral Hawkins who headed off the Armada in the 1500s. Well, that's very romantic, but that's not where you start. You might end up there. Chances are you won't, but you might end up there. But you always start with yourself, and you don't take anything for granted. That's like, if you're adopted, you don't know that, you know, you could be heading off in the wrong direction. So, literally, get your birth certificate out. You haven't seen it for a while, and make sure that all the information that's on there is something that you know, and that you begin to enter into your ancestral chart. We'll talk about the ancestral chart. That's one of the most basic things that you work with. And you have a picture of that on page 1 there. That's a typical ancestral chart. In other words, I'm Eric Stumpf, and I'm married to Linda Kruger. Okay, so you write that information down. And then the next generation, Lowell C. Stumpf was my father, Jacqueline Lucas, my mother, and then you go to the next generation. That's what you fill out, that ancestral chart, or pedigree chart as it's sometimes called. That kind of focuses and organizes what you're doing. That's how you go back in time tracing your family. You can either do it on paper, or you can do it on an internet site. You're on Ancestry. You're on Ancestry. You're not on.
My
anything.
son is though.
Okay, well, keep that in mind. Maybe you can borrow his password. Are you on Ancestry?
Well, I was for a while.
Okay.
I bought that family tree maker, which is where
Oh,
I
yeah.
put all of this stuff in, so I have, and I've got that, but I'm not linked to Ancestry anymore because I haven't paid more money.
Okay, and are you on anything?
No.
Okay.
I could look into it. It costs money though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to start with the assumption that you're going to do it on paper, because frankly, that's about the cheapest way to do this. And not everybody, you know, everybody sort of starts out and they go, you know, this is just too complicated, too time consuming, I'm not interested, and you're not out of very much. In your packet here, there is a ancestral chart. That's what this looks like. And before you start writing on this, I would suggest go to a copier and knock out about 10 of these, and then you've got a nice supply. And you will see on there for each person, there are some subcategories that you also want to fill in. Born, place, married, place, died, place. This is the skeleton of your ancestors. When were they born? Who did they marry? The assumption is that they did marry if they're your direct ancestors, because that's how you came about. And where did they die, and when did they die? that's the skeleton. That can satisfy some people, you know, maybe that's all they really want to know. But as you get into genealogy, you go, yeah, but what did they do? You know, were they farmers? Were they merchants? Were they, you know, how do I find out about that stuff? You know, like where did they live? It could be a couple of miles down the street, you know, or clear across the country. That begins to fill in who these people were. It gives them flesh so that you better understand them and comprehend that. We'll get into a lot more of that later, but the first essential thing that you need to have is what I call triangulation. That's my term. I don't know what genealogists actually use, but triangulation means three things that you need: a name, a date, and a place. If you only have a name, you have practically nothing. For example, John Smith. Goodness gracious, there's a ton of John Smiths in this country. That doesn't mean much. How do you know that you're even related to this person? Second thing is the date. Well, I think I had a grandfather, don't know his name. He was born in 1905. That's almost worthless. You know, I mean, it's a place to start, but that doesn't give any identification. Or I had a grandfather, I think he was born sometime in the late 1800s, and but he was born in Chicago. Well, guess what? There was a lot of people that were born in Chicago. Again, that's not identification. But if you have a John Smith born in 1905, Chicago, Cook County, Illinois, now you got an identity. This is something you can actually work with. It doesn't mean that there aren't other John Smiths born in 1905. That's why you want the birth date, the 6th of June. That really narrows it down. What you're trying to do is narrow the information down so it can only fit one person. And that identity then gives you some certainty as I'm on the right track here. I also write there, write the county down. Get into the habit of every time you're writing down a place where they were born, where they were married, where they died, you also put the county in. Even if you said, well, Chicago, of course, that's Cook County. Put the county down, because you're going to be dealing with other places like Greenville, Ohio. Well, that's in Darke County. Write Darke County down. That's something you're not as familiar with. Why? Because if you're going to do any further investigation on this person, almost all usable records, especially in the 1800s, are on the county level. In other words, you can go to Darke County, go to the courthouse in person, if you don't have to in person, but you could go there and find the information, the records. And that way it saves you some time about, well, you know, where's Greenville, Ohio? Well, I'll have to look that up to find the county. Well, you get in the habit of it. And if you do that with a lot of other people, then you begin to see patterns. Oh, this whole side of the family was from Darke County. Oh, well, okay, that's important to know. All right, so at the bottom of page 1 there, Vernon Stumpf, born 12th of July, 1916, Canton, Fulton County, Illinois. Where did you get this information? Okay, you wrote it down, you found it, but where did you get it? Now, you might be satisfied and said, oh, I found it in the book. That's all I need to know. Okay, well, the chance, here you're taking a chance because maybe you got the wrong information. 2 years later, when you go back looking at this, you're going to be asking the question, well, where did I get that information? If you didn't write it down, then you forget. Okay? And if you forget, then you can't backtrack and recheck things, especially if you get on the internet and you're conversing, people will send you messages and say, hey, we have an ancestor in common here. But your birth date and my birth date for this person are different. Where did you get your information? Okay, and if you're right back and say, well, I kind of forgot. That really discredits, not that you care really that much, but it discredits what your information is. But if you can say, well, it is from a birth certificate issued by this county on this certain date, then you've got a source, you've got proof. It's like a footnote. You can prove that the information you came up with, you didn't dream up. And this is the thing that unfortunately happens. Because anybody can put a family tree out on the internet or publish it or anything. And sometimes they get frustrated when they can't find the right information. So they kind of cook things up. They take a guess. Well, he was about 40 years old when he died. So 40 from the death date, and okay, 1833. Well, we'll just put in there 5th of July, 1833. Oh, they just leave it as 1833. Yeah, well, that's not a good footing to try to continue, because every piece of research you do, you're going to build on it. That birth date is going to lead you to someplace else, and if you're building on a shaky foundation, you could end up researching people that aren't related to you at all. They have the same last name, but they're not really your people. Okay, so constantly remind yourself, I need those three things. I need to write, where did I get it? Even if you're saying, I'm guessing, just write, I'm guessing, or this is the logical conclusion. But then if you find better information, then you go back and cross that out, put in the better information. Okay, next page, page 2. This is not a birth certificate. I wanted to show you that there's other places to get birth records other than a birth certificate. Birth certificate is probably the best, but sometimes you can't always get birth certificates. This certificate is a World War II draft card for young men. That's the title of that collection. It's accessible through Ancestry.com. There might be some other places. National Archive would have it. And in this form, this was written by the person himself. Okay, so you can see the signature at the bottom, Vernon O. Stone. Okay, at the top he wrote his name, he wrote his address. Ooh, I know where he lived when he was in his mid-20s or something like that. That's important to know. When people moved around, they left part of themselves, where they worked, who their associates were, in-laws, there's all sorts of things. But that gives you a hint of where to look further when you're trying to get the flesh onto that skeleton of birth, marriage, deaths. Okay, so we know where he lived. He was 24 years old when he wrote this out. His place of birth was Canton, Illinois. He should have put or Canton is the town, yeah, Canton, Illinois. He has his birth date. The assumption is at the age of 24, he probably knew his birth date. Okay, that's a good assumption, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it. Okay, you want something more specific, more closer to the primary source. But that's a good place to start. And then it names the people that know him. You might presume that, well, it's probably well, he does write, that's my father, the father's address, where he worked, International Harvester. Wow, okay, there's another good piece of information. Why? Well, if you, again, adding flesh to the bones, you can write to International Harvester, they're still in business today. Explain to them that you had an ancestor that worked for their company in the early 1940s, I guess. And do you have any work information about them? A lot of big corporations have archives. They don't publish it, they don't talk about it because they don't want to be flooded with a lot of requests because that costs money. But if you write to them and say, you know, like his father, this oral stuff, also worked for International Harvester. I wrote to them and they sent me back his complete pay schedule. So I know what he was paid from the time he started with the International Harvester to when he retired. He retired at $55 a week. Doesn't sound like very much, but he was able to make a pretty good living. His promotions and all the different places that he worked at. Unbeknownst to me, he was working for International Harvester in Canton, Illinois. He was sent to Memphis, Tennessee after World War II to start a new factory. So he was part of a team that did that. I didn't know that. And they were nice enough to send me a few copies of promotional materials. It has a nice picture of him and what he did, and what his part was on that team. That's flesh that you put with that skeleton. And so now he becomes more of a real person than just 3 dates. I mean, that's all you got, that's all you got, but there's so much more out there if you're willing to make the work. Okay, but this thing is what we call a secondary source. A secondary source is information that has some kind of official connection. It's a connection that's worth your attention, but it is information that is recorded time after the event. For example, here, he's 24 years old. He's giving us his birth date. This was not done in 1916. This was done in 1940 something or other. So this is removed from that actual date, the time of his birth. So it's a secondary source. We're getting it from a secondary person. Other secondary sources are like family baby books. My parents had a family baby book. They had 5 or 6 generations. Later I found out there were a few, little goofs. They didn't know, but it was secondary. It's later than the primary source. Other family trees, this I can't stress too much. When you're looking at somebody's family tree, that's their work. You have no idea how accurate they are, but it's a family tree. I'm not saying it's junk, don't even look at it. Look at it. But as Ronald Reagan said, quoting an old Russian proverb, trust but verify. So you start there, but you always check everything out. You want a primary source that backs it up. Okay? Primary sources, that's the goal. Now, sometimes you can't always get primary sources. Yeah.
I have found, even on Ancestry, that if you look at someone else's family tree, your family tree, you really have to be careful.
Oh, yeah.
Because some people just aren't, they don't look at the dates they put down, they grab the first thing that they see that they think might agree. They go by name and not by date, and you can really go down some rabbit holes real quick.
Yep. So a lot of family trees will have no sources at all. Okay, that's one that you have to just verify it completely. There are family trees that will have the sources. They'll tell you where they got the information. yay, but don't take it on faith. Use that to look up. If they say, I got this information from the National Archives in Washington, a report, military record during the Civil War. Okay, all right, that sounds pretty good. I'm gonna write to the National Archives, I want my copy. I want that same copy to verify that they didn't even embellish that a little bit. That I have the primary source. That's absolutely and those records are primary source because they were records that were recorded at the time or near the time of the person's service. Okay, not 20 years later, when memories can get fuzzy. Okay, the date of a birth, the date of birth on a death certificate is a secondary source. In other words, the birth was 40 years ago, the death record is 40 years later. Probably it's correct, and that's where I would start looking, but doesn't mean it's the same thing as a birth record. Yeah.
I can speak to that real fast. On our death certificates, if we get them from out of state, they don't have a date of death, and we have to ask the family. So we're just going on the family's word. Oh, did they
Yep.
die December 21st, 2023? They could get the date wrong. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And with the cemetery, for example, you're dealing with death records, not birth records.
Right.
Or marriage records or anything like that. That's your primary source, which is fine. But as a genealogist, if you're trying to find that birth record, a death record is a good start, but I would like to get that birth record, you know, to really make sure. Because every once in a while you get really crazy things, like a 10-year-old boy gets married and has a child. I don't think so. A 60-year-old woman is having children. I don't think so. Might be sister or younger sister or something. But okay, primary sources are the best. Birth certificate for the date and place of birth. In fact, if that's the only record in existence, and there's a very strong doubt that is accurate based on something like this. If that is the only record, that's it. That's what you go by. Even if you can put a little note and say, I kind of question this. Where you sometimes run across this is you go to a cemetery, you find the tombstone of your, or headstone, I never get that straight. You find the grave marker of a great uncle or a great uncle, died in the 1840s. Okay, it will say born 1823, died 1830 or something like that. Okay, that grave marker is a secondary source. Somebody had to come up with that date of birth. I have run into, it doesn't happen too often, but I've run into headstones that had the wrong date. And especially look at the stone itself. If you have somebody that died in the 1700s, and the grave marker looks like it was just placed about 50 years ago, this nice red granite, that was a replacement stone. So the date could be wrong, or it was a stone ordered 30 years later. They didn't have the money for a stone when the person died and was buried. But 30 years later, they did have the money, and then they put the stone, well, we kind of forgot what exactly the date he died, so they fudge it by just giving you the year. It's the wrong year. You know, you get that kind of complication. Marriage records usually found on the county level. Below that, I've got a copy of a marriage record, okay? Now, look at it very closely, and you will find, this was in a book, and it was one long straight line. I couldn't do that so that you could read it. It would be way too small, so I just split it up. But look at the first column. It says number of the license, you got a license number, date of license. It's amazing how many people think that's the marriage date. It's not the marriage date, that was the date that they got the license. And I run across this a lot of times in family trees. They put that date down, because that's the first date they see. They go, oh, that must be the marriage date. And, but it's not accurate. Now you might say, well, who cares? Well, it's been known that couples had 9 months later a child 9 months after they got married. Not often, but it does happen. Okay, if you get the date for when they applied for the license, that might be 2 weeks, 3 weeks off. You go, then it looks like they had a little test run before the marriage. Well, that would, you don't want to give that impression. It's just not accurate.
I think you could also make the case that, yeah, they applied for the license, but then they never actually got married.
That's another one, yeah.
You know, that
Oh,
you don't,
yes.
unless you actually have a marriage license or
Yeah.
something that says, yes, I actually got married.
And in that kind of case, it will be recorded as a marriage in the marriage book. But then if you look farther down, it will say date, the second line, the column way to the right, it says date of return and then when registered. Okay, date of return was March 16th, 1911. So this is at least over a month from the time that it was taken out. But if they didn't get married, this will be blank, which means they didn't get married. Or if they got married someplace else. But the marriage license was not returned, and so the person wasn't, at least from here, was not married. Okay? So then if you look at the other columns, full name of the groom, that's great, especially if you don't know the name of that person. Aunt Tilly married somebody, and I had a great aunt that the family thought she had been married, had no idea who she married, was out in California, who cares, and she never admitted to anything. Well, I tracked that down, found a marriage license with her name, because it coincided with her name, her birth date, where she was born, so it's the same person. And the name of that person, and that person turned out to be a rather a schnook, and she divorced him after, I think it was 2 months or something like
wow.
that. And of course, she wasn't going
That's
to
why she
talk
wasn't
about
wanting to
that.
talk about it, yeah.
But now, for all posterity, I do have the guy's name. There was no children that came out of it, so but it's that meat that is added to the flesh that tells you something about that person. Okay, and then the age of the person, all this stuff is corroborating evidence. The marriage is the primary source. The other stuff, like how old they were, when they were born, that's secondary. But it's still pretty good stuff. Again, you're gonna work off that, and so forth and so on. You can look at that in more detail. But that's kind of a typical marriage record that is found on the internet, or if you go to the county seat. You go to the county seat and say, I would like and I used to do that before computers. I can almost pin the date on when I started getting interested in genealogy. It's October 1959. One of the things I enjoyed as a kid, and I was in 7th grade, I think, 6th grade, 7th grade, was getting the Saturday Evening Post. I just loved it. Saturday Evening had nice cartoons, good stories, and the cover was almost always Norman Rockwell,
Yeah.
which I just loved. Both my parents were artists, and they thought very highly of him as an illustrator. Okay, so October 1959, Saturday Evening Post showed up. It had a family tree on the cover that Norman Rockwell had done. Very fanciful. At the top was a little kid with red hair, which was what I was. I had red hair, and I went, "Well, that's me." And then there was, pirates and Civil War characters and colonists that were part of that tree. I went, "Wow!" It was like my mind went, "You mean there's something past my grandparents, that is worth checking out?"
exactly what you're talking about.
So that was kind of the start for me. Okay, and I used to go to do these field trips, going to county seats, but you don't have to do that anymore. If you're willing to go into getting like Ancestry.com, they have all that information in the comfort of your home. You can just download it, and in fact, they even do the nice thing about indexing it, so you can find it like this. When I would go to the National Archive in Chicago to look at census records, you got a 4-hour time slot. In 4 hours, if I was hitting everything right on cue, I could do maybe 4 or 5 investigations, and get the information. 1 an hour. And I thought I was doing really good, because there were times I'd go there, 4 hours, didn't find a thing. You can find 4 of those in less than 2 minutes today. That's how fast it is, and good. Okay, because it is indexed. Okay, I think Beth, you were kind of talking about plumber.
Yeah.
With 1 M. Okay. It's nice to know the right spelling, but not all spelling, not everybody spelled things the same way, especially if you
True.
came from Germany,
Yeah.
came to America, they kind of spelled things what they heard. So Stumpf, S-T-U-M-P-F, became stump, no F. The English ear, for some reason, couldn't hear the F at the end. Or as one German genealogist told me, well, your people came out of Baden, and they don't pronounce the F. It's stump. So when they came over, that's probably how they pronounced it. And the English ear went, oh, okay, S-T-U-M-P, no F. So, and that, for me, that was a hang-up that took almost 7 or 8 years for me to get over, and then find my great-grandfather.
You also have to watch for family names that change. Because the family became, the names and records were Roosterholz. And then my great-grandmother's, her father, part of his life he went from Roosterholz, the other part he just shortened it to Rose. And my great-grandmother is Rose. So you have to be careful of those kinds of things
That's really quite a change.
Oh, that's quite a change,
Yeah.
too.
And my mother's family was, I didn't know this till World War I guess. They were von Getz. They dropped the von. So you have to know those kinds of things when going into.
The nice thing about if you're working with Ancestry, they their program is set up so that plumber with 1 M. They're also going to find plumber with 2 M's and some other variations. And they do it so automatically you don't even notice. I mean, you'll notice because, oh, well, this name has 2 M's. It can't be mine.
Yeah.
Well, don't be so sure.
Yeah, even simple, I run into that a lot.
Yeah.
Jan's side of the family, she does have some German in there. And when the family came over, the last name is spelled P-A-P-E. But the way they pronounced it, to the first census taker in Pennsylvania, the name got changed to B-A-U-B-Y.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
A
you
lot of these census takers were just kind of day workers.
Pencil
What they
pushers.
wanted to do was to have school teachers, especially if the census was taken in June, because then they had the greatest amount of accuracy. However, they couldn't always do it on summer vacation. So sometimes you get some real creative spelling.
Oh, yeah.
But the nice thing about it is Ancestry.com figures that out, and when you're looking for somebody, they'll come up with some variations. You go, well, that can't be. But check it out anyway. It could be. Stump is often comes out as stone. How that happens, I don't know.
Well, I found with the German names, I mean, these long German names, you get an umlaut in there, and then when they're telling the people where they come into the country, it's not like my grandmother's married name was Schluter, S-H-L-U, umlaut, E-T-E-R, and then in some places it's Sleater, and some places it's something else, but the umlaut messed people up a lot, and I found that in Ancestry.
An umlaut is two dots over a vowel, and in English, what they'll often do is put the vowel and then add an E.
Yeah.
Linda's family were Krieger, K-R-U with an umlaut, G-E-R, but the English kept wanting to spell it K-R-U-E-G-E-R, and so half the family went that way, and the other half of the family, this is what God gave us, this is what we're going to keep. So then you get the separation kind of thing. Okay, next section. Use the library. Munster has very little, but it does have access to a computer. If you don't have a computer, you can go there and use their computer and access Ancestry.com for $0.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
best bargain around.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, $0. Of course, you're probably saying, yeah, but I don't know how to use a computer. We'll get to that. Maryville is the best in Lake County with the genealogical room and helpful staff, especially Lynn Jackson. Go there, make your acquaintance with Lynn Jackson, or call ahead and make sure she's going to be there. Super nice woman. She'll sit down, she'll help you. I go to her for stuff I need to know, because I don't know everything.
Now, is that mostly just people from this area, or do they have access to records?
Well, they have,
all over
well,
the
if you
country?
go into their room, that's where all the genealogical books, they have it throughout the world.
Okay,
And for a local library, it's not bad. It's a whole lot better than Munster, but as a local library, it's not bad.
That's the Lake County Public
This is the one on
Library,
30th?
30.
In Maryville, yeah.
Around 30,
on
yeah.
30?
Right, around 30, right. Second best in the nation is Allen County Public Library. You were mentioning
I
that.
was there.
It's second best because the best is in Salt Lake City, Utah. They have everything, or at least they claim they have everything. But the nice thing about it is you don't have to go to Salt Lake City. You can go to the website familysearch.org. It's free, which is really nice. You have to put your name in and get a password, that kind of stuff. But almost all their stuff in their library is on the internet, and it takes a while to figure out how to access the stuff, but it's really good. And the two major things that they have is, number one, primary source materials, like birth certificates, marriage certificates, or records, land records, wills, they have all that kind of stuff. And the second thing is family trees. Now that's where most people will go for first. Here, that's where the trouble comes in, because you don't know who made this family tree, you don't know how responsible they are. You check their sources, they either had no sources, it's like tiptoeing through a landmine. Or they do have sources, you have to check the sources out, otherwise you just take it for granted. Could be the wrong source, or they made up the source, that's even worse. Or it's only partial, which means you can't even find it.
Excuse me, the stuff there then at FamilySearch.org, are they getting their stuff from Ancestry, or is Ancestry getting their stuff from them, or who has the better info?
Well, they've been around a lot longer than Ancestry,
Okay,
okay?
Family source is Mormon.
Yes, I'm gonna get to that.
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah,
Latter-day
that's our first, oh, don't worry. Don't worry, I'll explain. They were before Ancestry.com. They index their stuff, that's really that's really helpful. Ancestry.com also indexes. I think they work together somehow. Because, like for example, well, I need a primary source for a birth of somebody in Germany in 1815. Well, you're not gonna get it in this country. So you go to Family Search, you type in the person's name, give as much information as you have. They'll run it through their computer and they'll come up with a list of possibilities. Okay? Some of those possibilities will be the actual microfilm picture of the record book from Germany. So you've got, this is primary source material. Of course, the challenge is just trying to read it, you know, but somebody over there read it and indexed it that way, so you're way ahead on that function.
The nice thing about Family Search is it's free.
It's free. Yeah.
Whereas Ancestry, if you want to get a European thing, you got to pay extra.
Yeah, and you pay a pretty hefty price. But it's awfully good stuff. There's really nobody better than Ancestry.com, and they keep getting better and better and better as they add records, and it'll come to a point where if you start working with paper and you're going, boy, this is really great stuff. I'm thinking I want to get farther, go back. Eventually, you're going to have to open up the purse and buy into a site to get the information, because some of that information just isn't available in this country.
But it is cheaper than taking a plane over there.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Maybe not as much
Less
fun.
though.
But it is cheaper.
When I would go to a county courthouse to search records before really it was available on computers, I'd stop at the donut shop in town, get a dozen donuts, go into the courthouse, go to the records place, put the box of donuts down, introduce myself and say, I thought maybe you'd be kind of hungry. Boy, 12 donuts really can open a lot of doors. And oftentimes they figured out I knew what I was doing, so they go, it's all in the back there, go ahead and look. And I didn't have to ask permission, can I take this book out? You know, of course you put it back the way it was, but those days are pretty much kind of gone. You don't need them. Locally, Newberry Library has a large collection. There's the address. Now, if you have any English ancestry in your background,
Yes.
you do. No, okay. Lucky you. English ancestry has been the most researched of all ethnic groups.
Yeah.
And Newberry is a gold mine, because from about the 1880s to about 1920, anybody with English ancestry, for some reason or other, wanted to publish their family trees. And they got them all. And when I first started, my grandmother had English ancestry. She was a Dawson. So, whoa, there was just so much there. It was terrific. German ancestry,
Ugh.
you better
Yeah.
care less, you know, but for English ancestry, it was really the place to go. And they're very nice there and helpful. Take time to read a how-to book. You got one of those by a subject specialist in the field of genealogy. Genealogy is like so much in life. If you invest your time, energy, and learning in an area, it always comes back in bigger dividends. Because you'll understand what you're doing and go a lot further. If you're not going to make that investment, and some people are like that, all they want to know is who their great-grandparents are. Anything past that, they're not interested. Okay, you know, fill out your ancestry chart. You should be able to do it fairly easy in a short amount of time. $0 spent, and put it on your bookshelf and be happy. Great. Some people are, once they get the bug, they can't. Adam and Eve is who they're going to go for. Of course, that's clearly impossible, but they just keep going. They just keep going. That's sort of like me. Join a local genealogical society. The one in Lake County that is well known is Northeast or Northwest Indiana Genealogical Society. Even if your search is not tied to Lake County, Indiana, members can be a great help with advice and know-how. Miss Lynn Jackson belongs to that. She's either the head of it or she takes turns being president or something like that. You'll find people who have done work outside of Lake County, and they can be extremely helpful for you and show you how to do things or where to find things. Most genealogical societies have special interest groups that are specifically geared toward helping researchers become familiar with genealogical or genealogy software programs. So that, and they're fairly cheap, you know, $10 to maybe $40 a year is the membership. They have generally a monthly meeting if they can get past this COVID thing. A lot of times they do Zoom, and that it's worthwhile. Now, what's the difference between that and, say, DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution?
Well, usually with the DAR, you have to prove,
Yeah,
whereas the Genealogical Society, you just go.
yeah.
And you don't have to prove anything.
Yeah, DAR is very specific, Daughters of the American Revolution. Not to say that they aren't helpful.
Right.
You can come to them and say, I'd like to join. I think I'm a descendant of somebody that was in the American Revolution. Here's what I found so far. They may look at it and say, no way. Or they might say, yeah, there's possibilities. Let's help you. We'll help you. But once you join, then actually genealogy is kind of set to the side. It's not really that important.
We're done.
You know, they have tea parties, they raise money for good things. I belong to the SAR, which is Sons of the American Revolution. I was deeply disappointed that there was nothing to do with genealogy after I joined. They just want my dues and come out a couple of times a year.
Don't they give scholarships? Do they still do?
Oh, yeah, they do scholarships, but I don't need a scholarship.
Well, right. But if you've got grandchildren,
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
or children, because I told Jan, I said, well, we could join the DAR, the SAR, or the Mayflower Society. There's a number of societies out
Mhm.
there for the purpose of getting scholarships.
yeah. Or the other thing, it's kind of an ego thing. I belong to the SAR. I belong to the DAR. I've had correspondence from people who, sign their name And then at the bottom, they have all the organizations that they belong to, which you have to prove that you have a right to belong to that organization. Well, that's kind of an ego thing. That's fine, you know. Okay, the importance of keeping records. Again, I can't stress this too much, but you're gonna have records like this one. This is your most basic record. Where are you gonna put this? Can you find it 3 years later? Those are the questions that are important. Here's my suggestion, if you're just starting out. Now, if you use Ancestry.com, you put it into Ancestry, they keep it for you. All that information, by the way, is not on your computer. You have access to their source. So if something happens to your computer, you haven't lost everything. You know, I haven't lost 60 years worth of work. You know, it's on their computer. So this is what I started out doing. This is pre-computer stuff. Get yourself a 3-ring binder. I haven't used this in ages. Have page dividers. Divide it by surname. Okay? And then just put all your stuff in your binder. And the nice thing about a binder is you know where it is. It's easy to look something up. Okay, Bingham. Okay, that's the family, and then I've got all my stuff, my notes, especially. That's important. And sitting on your bookshelf, and you have easy access to it. If you happen to go to a library to do some research, because you're not on a computer, it's easy to just pick this baby up, take it with you to the library, and refer to it as you're going through your stacks and looking for stuff up. Some genealogists will tell you, don't throw anything away. It's a nice thing to say, and I at one time I asked this genealogist, I said, okay, so I'm doing some notes on a pad, just for my edification or to put into the computer. Don't throw those away? No, don't throw those away. Wow, the storage problem you're going to have after 20 years is going to be enormous. Not to mention, how do you find this stuff again? But there is some truth to it. You know, stuff that you don't understand, you think is worthless, keep. Somehow put it, and if you want to graduate from a 3-ring binder, just go to a manila envelope. Get yourself a file cabinet. They're cheap. You go to the thrift store, you can pick one up for really not much, under 50 bucks. Get a 4-drawer, under 100, and get your binders. And then just like the 3-ring binder, put the family name on, put it alphabetically so you can easily find this stuff. Put everything, not just your ancestral chart and other charts, but just put it all in there. And that way, 2 years from now, when you're coming around and you're going to start doing some more work in that family, you pull the whole thing out, review what you've done in the past. Maybe after 2 years you go, I should have kept, I should have followed this one path. And then you can go right back to it. You don't have to rethink things again. So it's really, it'll save you a lot of headaches and time. Some other things that are very important to have is to use a research calendar. A copy of that is in your group here. It's past your outline. Okay. This is what it looks like. Before you start using this, make photocopies of it for yourself. And on the back, I printed out an example of what a research calendar is used for. For example, put the date down when you did something. The repository, where is this information that you got Where can I find it again? Okay, Wheaton Public Library. By the way, Wheaton Public Library is very good. It's better than Maryville, but it's in Illinois, so, and it's a drive. Description of the source, the book, or the record, or whatever. Time period, name, searched. So it's a way to let you know what that research material is for. And the result, well, I found the Elmer Schmidt family information. Write that down, that's your law. So that 2 years from now, if you're saying, you know, where did I find that information about Elmer? You can go to the Schmidt file, pull this thing up, say, oh yeah, 2 years ago I found that information at the Wheaton Public Library. I want to do a follow-up. Maybe, or I'm going to go visit there and see what else they got. And because not everything that is published is on the computer yet. That's going to take some time for that to happen. Or 12th of December 2012, WikiTree, that's another site that is funded by the LDS, the Family Search. And they deal almost exclusively with family trees. It should be a big warning sign for you. But again, a family tree can give you some leads. So wikitree.com, if you have a computer, look that up. And it's very easy to use. And again, if you find a family tree there that interests you, check out what kind of sources are they listed. A lot of times they don't find any sources, so beware. Sometimes they put sources there, primary, secondary. Check it out first before you enter it into your ancestral. Okay, so research calendar. Another very practical form is your correspondence calendar. Yes, you're going to write letters. Of course, they have to be alive to get the letter, but these are people that you're going to write to, great aunt so-and-so, and on the back it shows you, for instance, how that can be done. So you put the name and address so you can find these people again. The purpose, I want a picture of Elmer Schmidt. Date, reply, in other words, you asked this person, John Elmer Schmidt, for a picture of Elmer Schmidt, and they sent you a copy a month later. In fact, they sent 5 copies. And then write follow-up. You might say, well, if you had copies of Elmer, how about his wife? I didn't ask for his wife, so you write that. Say, hey, you got any pictures of the wife? You know, and this is an organized way of saying, did I follow every little lead till it's exhausted to get this information? Okay, another one is your research calendar. And again, on the back, we have some examples. And again, this sort of helps you. That's the one I was referring to before, research calendar. Okay, research calendar, correspondence calendar. Oh, source. Source calendar. You found a birth certificate, you made a copy, but now you want to just make sure that you can find it again. So in the back, you have the date, the type of certificate or source that you're looking for, birth record, source, Aunt Rita, record location, Schmidt, Elmer file, whether that's in your file cabinet or a 3-ring binder. In other words, I want to find this again. I want to give it another look. Of course, if you put it on Ancestry.com, there's also a place there to put photographs,
Yeah,
which is really very nice.
it's interesting.
Not only photographs of old, ugly people,
Yeah, oh.
but also you photograph, take your phone, get the camera out, take a photograph of a birth certificate, of a newspaper article, whatever, and you put it in the gallery, so then you don't have to put it in the file.
I was gonna say, my Dad's two cousins that I keep in touch with. We send each other newspaper articles
Oh, yeah.
that we found.
And what drives you crazy, or at least it drives me crazy, they send the article, cut right on the margin, but they don't write what newspaper it came from,
And
what
the
the
date.
date was,
The date.
what the page was. You know?
Actually, they're pretty good about it.
Good for you. You
Yeah.
got good. You got good relatives. Mine just, you know, I go, well, this is wonderful. How can I find this again? You might say, well, you got the real thing here. What do you need to find things? Well, you never know.
Yeah.
Never know. Okay, so you got your sources here, and very, very important to keep track of that stuff.
That's a good idea.
And so just to kind of reiterate, location and order. Where can I find the stuff that I collected so I can find it again? Because my cousin Elmer says that I got the wrong date. Well, I'm going to show him I have the right date. I have a cousin who insists that the family name is Stumpf. Stump is your mistake. Well, I sent him what I found, and he never replied back. So that was as good as an admission that I'm never going to get. So location and then order, in other words, so that you can find stuff. Alphabetical order is probably the easiest thing to do, but don't get so specific that you have, well, I've done that. I have Stumpf, Christopher, you know. They each have their file folders because I've got a lot of material. But if I put all the Stumps in one file folder, it'd be a huge thing like this. Last form is, this is a family group record. This is sort of like your ancestry chart, but it just focuses on the family. So in other words, you can put dad, mom, all the children, and so forth. Now, you might be tempted to say, well, I'm not interested in the children. You know, they're just cousins. Well, sometimes when you can't find information about your grandparents or great-grandparents, and you just can't find it, track down the kids. You were kind of mentioning what happened to these kids. You want to know. You want to know because they could have information that you'll need. For example, I was tracking down a family and they disappeared. They just, 1870, they were in the census record, 1880, gone. Couldn't find them. They vanished. And I can tell you, I went through person by person down the census records back in on Pulaski Avenue. Took months. I couldn't find them. Well, eventually I did a field trip. I went up to a county courthouse and I was looking for other records, and I remember, oh yeah, one of the sisters lived in this county. So I went, they didn't have very much, and I was about to walk out and I thought, I said, where's your probate records? Now, probate is when a person dies, you either leave a will, or if you don't leave a will, your estate gets probated by the state. They divide it up for you, but they keep records. Well, this person died without a will. So I went to the probate records, and they showed me where the box was, and they're in boxes like this, you know, on a bookshelf. I pulled the box out, I opened it up, and I knew instantly nobody had opened this box in almost 100 years. Because there was rubber bands, I think it was rubber bands, they were fossilized. They just broke into pieces. I pulled this all out, I read through the information, and I found out that that her brother, who we couldn't find after 1880, shows up and he wants his cut of the pie. Okay? He's got a completely different name. Completely different name. and I never did find out why, but he moved and he changed his name. And when they do that, boy, it's really tough to find them. Okay,
Escaping the law.
Yeah.
I've got one of my wife's great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers escaped the law. He murdered his wife and skipped town,
yeah,
and we can't find him.
yeah,
He probably moved west and changed his name.
yeah. You hope that they change the name and move because they owe money. That's the least of the problems. I mean, if you're, okay, homework. I know you didn't think you were gonna. Here's your homework. If you're a beginner like mine over there, what I would like you to do is to start working on your ancestral chart. Get a 3-ring binder with dividers or some file folders. I think Karen has access to some file folders. Get some file folders and start putting your stuff together. You know, the hots, I don't know, the family name that your dad married. Your mother's maybe.
Cedars.
Okay, have a file folder for that. Get organized. And then go over to Maryville Library and make your acquaintance with Lynn Jackson. And just tell her, that,
Okay.
you know, you're just starting this and, you know, how should I do it? Don't rely on me, just, you know, she's, okay, in other words, you get started. Next week, when you come back, you can give me a report.
Okay.
Any other, and you're kind of a beginner too.
Yeah.
Okay, so do the same thing. Make sure you get some photocopies of that ancestral chart and any other charts, so you don't run out. If you make the mistake and write on there and go, oh, I don't have that form, let me know and I will send you. Do you have that sign-up sheet?
Yeah.
Let me know and I'll send you you do work with a computer?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, I can send you the address and you can get these there templates online that you can,
The address is down there at the bottom, isn't it?
and then you can pass it to her. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And pass it to her.
What is this for?
If, I don't know, if they have the packet, if that's all they need.
Say
Me.
what?
What will you send
What
me?
is
Oh,
this
just
for?
put your name down that you attended here.
Oh.
Give me your email,
Oh,
and then I can let you know directly if something changes. Like if we get another 12-inch storm next Saturday, I
I'm
will
not gonna be here next
definitely.
Saturday.
What?
I'm not gonna be here
Oh,
next
okay.
Saturday.
yeah, I won't be here next Saturday either.
It's
All right,
Katie retreat.
that's good, because if none of you show up next Saturday, I would be thinking, oh, I really messed up here. Couldn't stand me. Okay, if you're a pre-computer literate person, you've done some work, but haven't jumped into using a computer, go to the Munster Public Library and ask for Mike. He's the reference library. I talked to him. He knows you're coming, if you're gonna go there. And ask him to demonstrate on how to use the library's computer and connect with FamilySearch.org. Here you can make an ancestral chart for free. That's where I got this thing from, it's Ancestry.com. It's all free, so it doesn't cost you. All you have to do is make sure you get a library card, because it's gonna ask you for that. That's your password, I guess. Okay, as I said, FamilySearch.org is run by the Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. And they have a particular doctrine of the baptism of the dead. In other words, the reason why they do family research is so that they can baptize their dead ancestors into the Mormon faith. It's not a scriptural thing at all. It is something that they came up with, But boy, is it motivating for these people, because they work like slaves to get information. They sent teams out after World War II to go to all the German, French places that had records and microfilm stuff. Most of the Europeans couldn't understand, why are you doing this? This is old stuff, nobody's interested in stuff. Well, we're interested in it. They microfilm like crazy, and that's what you're gonna access. As long as it's a microfilm, that's a primary source. Okay, the problem is that they also take in family tree records that their own members make, and they're accessed. They're clearly identified as family trees by people. So again, treat it with trust but verify. I found horrendous mistakes in family trees run by them, but that's typical. Now, if you're afraid that if you start using their site, they're going to visit you and make you a Mormon, they don't. I've used it for over 60 years.
I think she
I used to
did
go
it.
to
She
their
did it
family research
on this
places
other
and
sheet.
use their stuff.
Oh, okay.
They don't try to cross
Did
them.
Holly get it?
So don't worry
She
about
did
that,
it.
but they just really have good material. As long as it's
Susan.
primary, and then you can use it. All right. Second thing I want you to do is be very careful about using secondary sources. Make sure you identify them and get your ancestral chart going, up and going, and you can start filling it out by going to the library, go to Ancestry, it's free, and you can find out what stuff they have. The bottom picture here is a typical picture from Ancestry. On the first page is one from Family Search. And you can see what you have there. If you're a computer literate person, investigate or review various sites and report back. Tell me what your favorite site is. Those of you who are on a computer using an ancestral site have gone to Ancestry.com. Bravo, it is the best, bar none, that's out there for the sources, the records. Plus they're investigating. One of the nice things about it is you put a person into Ancestry.com, Elmer Schmidt, born in 1910, Chicago, Illinois, and that's all you know about him. As soon as you put it in, their computer goes churning away, and you mentioned this, you get hints.
Oh, yeah,
You know,
always.
a week later, you go back to your site.
You
see
get those
this
little green leaves up in the,
Yeah.
and the-
little green leaves from the family tree.
Yeah, it's
Hints.
really fun.
And you go, oh, what's that about? Click on it, and they've been working to find your Elmer Schmidt and any connection. Now, not all of them are correct,
right.
but you've got somebody searching that you don't have to.
Yeah.
And they're pretty spot on, you know? It's really a good thing to have.
Even if, like, I was on it only for a year, and then I was off for about 3 years. And then when I got back on, when my niece did it, I mean, all that time where I wasn't even paying into them, they kept sending me hints, which you couldn't access until you paid again. But, I mean, once you're in there, they're looking forever,
Uh-huh.
even if you haven't paid your money anymore. So then when you pay again, then you can go in and get all those hints.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's
Okay.
cool.
So please report back, you know, maybe you got your favorite site other than Ancestry that you go to. Report back and share with us those various sites. Once you get going, that's really important stuff. One of my favorite sites that a lot of people don't know too much about is called newspaper.com. This is a site in which all you do is you enter a person's name and the state that they lived in and the period of time. And that site scans all newspapers that they have on their records. And they will find that name for you. Now, it may not be that same person, but a lot of times they will find that person that you're looking for. And then you got a newspaper article. Like I had a great grandfather who was very political in the late 1890s. And he and the presidential candidate were, in his imagination, I'm sure, were buddies. But he went out campaigning, and the newspapers, the local newspapers, followed him around, recording what he said, what he was for, and what he was doing, and blah, 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 blah. You know, about 30 different articles. Again, there's the flesh that you add to the bone. Before that, I didn't know he was into this stuff. Okay, I really.
Is that a free site?
No.
Okay.
Not too many free sites.
Yeah.
On there.
Okay.
But it is. I think it's worth it. Of course, I look for a lot of people. Yeah. So, but I wouldn't do that today or next week. You want to get further along. You want to get the skeleton first, and then the rest. Okay. As a pastor, I close with prayer, but we're not going to close with prayer. So have fun. Yes, if you have any questions, stick around and I'll try as best I can to answer.
I had a question, how many generations back have you been able to go?
Well, my English ancestry I've gotten back to the mid-1500s.
Wow.
And that's about as far back as you can go unless you have royalty on your family tree, then you can go further back. German side, I found the German that came over to this country, landed in New York in 1710. I'm trying to jump the pond. That's one of the biggest challenges, is jumping the pond to find your ancestry in Germany or France. It's very challenging. Yeah.
What does this refer to?